Alright, so this is the video for lesson 7, so follow along with the PowerPoint. You've got, of course, your same student task checklist to follow along, so it'll help you keep updated with things. So for this lesson we'll have a practice, demonstrate, a QQC, and a self-reflection journal entry. We'll also be meeting in Emerge Family Therapy this coming Monday, October the 8th at 11 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and the reflection for that will be due at the end of the day. That's at 11:59 p.m. On the 17th, because the following day is fall break. Okay. So, looking along with PowerPoint now, we're talking about first some required safeguards. Okay, so learning really requires that we protect kids to be able to have some basic modes of protection in order for learning to be able to take place. So, some history behind that. The New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children was only emerged, I think this is amazing, only emerged after a similar organization set to protect animals emerged. So the rights for, say, labor laws and things with children came after certain laws of cruelty to animals. I think that's amazing, but that is what it is. Child abuse laws, per se, weren't put into effect until the 1960s. And it's really useful to think about less than 100 years ago, children were put to work as early as 7. They were considered to be little adults with basically the same ways of thinking and experiencing the world as an adult, except just in a smaller version, which we know, of course, not to be true at all at this point. So attachment. We've talked about attachment very briefly, I believe, before, but as we're focusing on it a little bit more because it has so much to do with protecting and safeguarding children, and that's what this lesson's really aimed toward. So attachment can be thought of as the quality of bond between infant and caregiver. Now I say infant because attachment really is formulated as early in life as that infancy stage, and a lot is relatively set then. That doesn't mean that attachment can't be cultivated and understood in different ways as one grows, but the impact of caregiving and early experience in infancy is truly foundational for the rest of life. So to grab a lot of attachment theory ideas and put them in one place succinctly, you might think of the couple of lists I have on this PowerPoint here. I want to make mention that a really inspirational guide, but particularly a good resource for attachment information, is Dr. Dan Siegel. So if you just do a Google search of him, he has lots of information online, lots of information on YouTube. He speaks a good bit, lots of good publications, particularly about attachment. So the 4 S's, a lot of this information comes from his research, 4 S's of attachment. You can be thinking about this in terms of how you might relate to a child to make sure that you provide them with these things to ensure as much as you can that they will have a secure attachment to early caregivers. The first is safety, so they feel safe from threat, from harm, from fear of becoming injured or not having enough resources, things like that. Also, seen is another one. A child needs to be seen not just from the outside but within, seen more emotionally, seen through their own eyes, and seen into their own states of their own mind. So, as an adult, letting a child know that I see what is going through their mind at any given moment. That's an important aspect of attachment. A child to be soothed during emotional intensity. So helping a child step back down when emotion has overwhelmed them is an important aspect also. And then lastly, security. Security in this sense means a general sense of well-being, of I'm okay. Even though things aren't great right now or things are painful right now, overall, I'm okay, it's okay, everything will be all right, that sense of security. Now, in direct interactional terms, some elements that have been shown to lead to secure attachment, and it's in this way that I've put it that you can think of secure attachment-oriented caregiving. So when you're working with children, you can have these 5 fairly simple things to put into action in your conversation and interaction with them so that you can do your best to influence them in a securely attached way. The first is contingent communication. Also, you could think of that as collaborative communication. It basically means that you, as the adult, base what you say, how you appear, how you respond to the child. You base all those things on what you think is going on in their mental life, what's going on in their inner world. So you can think of, by the way, I think you should look up Dan Siegel attachment relationships. I think that as a Google search will give you a document that outlines these 5 elements really well. So I really encourage you to do that. Look that up. So that's contingent communication, basing your response on what you think the child is experiencing in that moment, maybe their intentions and their overall emotional states of mind. Second element is reflective dialogue. This is kind of a little like contingent communication, that you see into the child's state of mind and then their inner life. But the reflective dialogue part comes when you articulate that to them. So you speak to them as though, like a mirror reflects an image, you reflect to them what their states of mind are at any given moment. So like listening behind their words and pointing out to them what is there. So a simple example would be if a child is screaming at you or tantruming, stating to them something other than "stop screaming at me," get yourself off the floor, or things like that. Stating to them, you appear to be really, really disappointed, or you're really angry at what just happened. It's a simple thing that doesn't make everything change instantly, but over time gives them a sense of, that's right, that's how I feel, so okay, now I know what to do with it. Now I know what I'm dealing with. A third element is emotional communication. It has a little bit, it overlaps a little with reflective dialogue, but it has to do with just discussing things in emotional terms, giving children the vocabulary, in a sense, to describe different negative emotion. Okay, so children think, I feel good, I feel bad, and those are good distinctions. But within the categories of good and bad, we can make it a lot more subtle. So I feel bad, but how bad? What kind of bad? I feel disappointed is one. Anger. I feel worried. I feel scared. I feel lonely. I feel rejected. I feel, those kinds of things. Gives it more nuance to their language so that they can then articulate their own states of mind. Coherent narrative basically means a sense of self that links past experience with present experience with future expectation. So here's a line of time, here's birth, here's death, here's life in between. And the child's coherence of narrative means that at any given point on that line, that's where they are in the moment, but they also can conceptualize or think about or feel an integration of who they have always been and how that's changed, who they are now, and who they hope to develop into the future. And that has a lot to do with family story, community, tradition, things like that can help them. Lastly, repair. Repair means when, not if, but when secure attachment-oriented caregiving is disrupted. When it is disrupted, because it inevitably will be. We all make mistakes. We all go down paths we don't want to. We all lose our temper. We all feel overwhelmed with anxieties. We all get annoyed. Those kinds of things. When that clear and coherent communication that's secure attachment oriented is disrupted, a return to the child and a discussion openly in an appropriate way about what happened, maybe including apologies at times, but maybe simply including descriptions and explanations of not one's reasoning for getting mad, but the fact that, say, I overreacted to you, little Susie or whoever you're talking to. I lost my temper, and I would have done this differently. So I wanted to tell you that. I might say, and I'm sorry I yelled at you. I was rude, I shouldn't have raised my voice. That kind of repair allows the child to feel like it's okay to make mistakes. It's normal to fall victim to those mistakes at times, and it allows them to avoid being shameful and isolated so that they can actually work through what has happened in that given moment. Okay? So I hope that was a really breezy way of overviewing those 5 things. I hope you can do a little more research on your own, looking up Dan Siegel attachment relationships as an example search to look more into it. The practice for this week is to consider the last slide I just went over, and to consider a little bit of active listening that was presented in Lesson 1. So look back at Lesson 1 also. That includes paying attention, demonstrating that attention, providing some feedback, deferring judgment or evaluation, and then responding appropriately. So think about attachment and then these aspects of active listening. And then during the next couple of days, I want you to treat this like a personal experiment, okay? Not just something to do for our class, but something that I want you to try to discover a new way of relating to other people in a certain way, even if you really have to try hard to do it. So the next time you interact with either a child, or if you don't work with children a whole lot right now, you can work with this with other adults too. Try to use discerningly and intentionally, try to use some more of the active listening response strategies, okay? Using those things like paying attention, eye contact, and providing feedback, and so on. And then also try to adapt your attitude or your stance in that conversation or interaction by orienting them to those 5 elements of secure attachment and caregiving, okay? So try to adapt active listening and secure attachment-oriented caregiving dialogue to your interactions over, just say, the next couple of days, okay? And make this try to make this a priority. Each time you move into a new room or a new interaction, each time you greet someone in a new situation, remind yourself to try to do something with this exercise, okay? It's for this class, for this assignment, but it's also so that you can broaden your repertoire or your skill set of communicating with people in ways that will transform how you feel and how they feel and how relationships are built between you. Okay? Report about your discoveries about that. You record some of the phrases you used, some of the questions you posed, and the ways you just changed your discussion tactics with them, and write a short reflection as a discussion post. And for this discussion post, I want you to reply to the other students' experiences too. Okay, so make sure you do that too. Okay, moving along, we're discussing safety, well-being, and physical well-being, mental well-being, and physical well-being. Physical safety and access to health services are really crucial, obviously. We have basics of food and water and shelter and freedom from threat. And then when we are ill or sick, access to reliable and quality healthcare services. So when you're working with children and their families, that's going to be something that's always in the background, a necessity that's always in the background. When we talk about wellness, we're going to be thinking of, give you a short list here of some examples of really important things. Food insecurity might be something that you face as a young child or a family. Malnutrition or simply no access to decent foods. It happens to be that healthy foods sometimes cost more, so that's a big limitation. That is associated with obesity because cheap food is often really unhealthy for you. Physical activity is a sort of attitude about the way we spend our time to take care of ourselves. Of course, substance use, and then sex education and substance abuse as being kind of things that go together in terms of helping kids educate themselves about what's out there and how to relate to those things and how they can become potential dangers. Now, specifically abuse and neglect, there are a few different varieties or families of abuse or neglect, things you could think about. Neglect basically means a failure to provide, I think this is a really good description, provide needed, age-appropriate care. That means physical, emotional, educational, and medical. Okay, so a failure to do that. It's a negation of involvement that leads to, that's what's considered neglect. Physical abuse, this is pretty direct harm in a physical way, and on the caregiving end, you're watching for signs of that in various ways. Different odd clothes that covers a lot of the skin that might be covering injuries or bruises. When you do see bruises or odd-looking cuts that don't go away, or when there's often or lingering injuries to a child. Emotional abuse is a little trickier, right? So emotional abuse can be basically thought of as communicating that the child is somehow inadequate, or worthless, or unloved, or unwanted, those things. And then child sexual abuse, of course, is something that happens too. So any form of sexual activity by an adult with another child in any or a child in a position of power or kind of like authority or influence over that child. Any sexual act or activity by an adult or another child of that higher kind of power status or influence status is considered sexual abuse. Now, with adults in particular, that means consensual or not. So if a child doesn't know what's happening exactly, but says, yes, that's okay, that's also considered child sexual abuse. With children underage, consent doesn't matter. Okay. Violence and bullying. So domestic violence in the home and often hidden, that's a very difficult one. Bias and prejudice is something that impacts the child's overall environment. Okay, so it's something that you can play a part of too. And then bullying, I think I like this definition of bullying too. Continual and deliberate attempts to hurt, frighten, or intimidate what would be considered a weaker person. Okay, now in situations of bullying, we have the bullies, or those who are doing the bullying, we have those who are being victimized, and then we have bystanders, those who observe and either involve and try to change in various ways, or stand back and basically acquiesce. That means that it implies a condoning of the act because of a lack of protest. Okay, and then of course dangerous adults, just various people who are in the world who might not have the well-being of a child in mind. These are all people or situations that you will have to prepare yourself for dealing with as a child care provider or a teacher. Okay, turning to media safety now. This was an amazing kind of statistic from one of our texts here. The time spent on media, on television in particular, averages around 10,000 hours to 15,000 hours of TV before the age of 18. That is a tremendous amount of time spending watching TV. Okay, and everyone has a TV and everyone watches screens of some sort. But it's good to know how much of our lives that's taking, how much of a child's life it's taking. The more engagement online, the more there are opportunities for positive and negative interactions online. So cyberbullying is something that you'll have to become quite a bit more aware of as you get involved with more and more childcare. Entertainment is rampant and ubiquitous and varied. So there's lots of different types of entertainment. Some of it is more unsavory than others, and often those types are intended toward other adults, not children, and so weeding out or filtering out can be difficult. However, even if things are more suitable for adults, if they're suitable for anyone, then marketing to children is often a part of the package. So you'll have to be in discussion with children through that to help them weed out what they'd like to see and what they'd like to continue watching. All right, there's a lot of people and organizations in the communities that can play a really positive role in a child's life. Religious institutions, civic services, businesses, and there's lots of businesses who volunteer time and things for tutoring, mentoring, sort of mentoring projects and things like that. Other positive adult groups, other peer groups, and things like that. Okay, so your demonstrate portion for this lesson. I want you to provide some small interactions. That means you write down, you basically record, kind of like the movie script assignment from earlier on this course. Provide some example interactions, but I want you to include analyzing comments and place them in brackets and in bold print. Okay, so that I know exactly what you mean and where it all stands. And I've given you an example of this on your PowerPoint. So use aspects of active listening and aspects of secure attachment-oriented caregiving. Okay, so look back at lesson 1 for the active listening kind of components, and previously in this PowerPoint for secure attachment-oriented caregiving for that. And use that style of discussion or style of interaction in your small examples. The examples don't have to be long, just like a back and forth interaction between adult and child. And again, I've given you an example, the example of a teacher like kneeling down, so some description of the body language would be really helpful. Teacher kneeling down, that's an example of paying attention and demonstrating that you're paying attention with eye contact, with body language. And speaking calmly with a young girl, who's just throwing something at another child out of anger, that's showing a sense of deferred judgment. So rather than pointing and scolding first, putting the judgment or the evaluation first, the teacher in this example decides to defer that judgment or to wait to investigate first. You can look at the example that I've given to see the rest of it, but and you can also, of course, email or call me if this isn't somehow clear. What I'm really looking for are snapshots of small portions of an interaction within which it's clear that the adult is using active listening, components of active listening, and orienting their conversation style toward secure attachment. Okay, so doing things like using emotional communication, reflective dialogue, things like that. Okay. All right, and submit that as an assignment on Blackboard. I want to give you a reminder also to submit your field experience reflection from the Emerge Family Therapy trip by October 17th by 11:59 p.m., the end of the day, because the next day will begin your fall break. Please don't forget to complete your QQC and your self-reflection, okay? Those are both parts of your participation and professionalism grade, and they will add up, okay? So if you're not doing those, make sure you're jumping on them to complete them. And have a great fall break. We won't have lesson 8 until the week of October the 22nd. And then the due date will be on that Thursday for any assignments and things. I think that's October the 25th, so that'll be the time for your assignments and things to be submitted. Okay, so reach out to me if you have any questions or anything like that, and good luck.